Every day, 1,012,533 people are living in the U.S. with or in remission from leukemia, Hodgkin's lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, or myeloma. Over the past 60 years, $875 million has been invested in developing better cancer treatments. Since the 1960s, the survival rate has doubled, tripled, even quadrupled for blood cancers. Tonight, learn more about how this cancer strikes people of all ages at all stages in life and how they're fighting back to overcome this terrible disease. That's next here on News 20. And welcome back to News 20 here on GTN. I'm Randy Gardner. We've got a great show for you tonight. As you saw in the open, joining me to my right, we have Debbie Kirsting, the Executive Director of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Glad you could join us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Randy.
And to your right, we have, I'm going to call you the Executive Survivor, as you put it, Jamie Joyle. Thank you for joining us, a blood cancer survivor. We appreciate your time here this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. First of all, as we talked about before we went on the air, for years and years, 15, 20 years, we've worked with the American Cancer Society up and down. We've never delved into this. Through some family matters, it was brought to the forefront in my life, and we contacted you. And through the website, through learning and talking, I've learned a lot about this.
Yes.
Tell us, from your standpoint, being the executive director, what Leukemia and Lymphoma Society does and means to the community.
Absolutely. And Randy, you know, a lot of this is public awareness because what we do is research to find a cure for blood cancers. There's about 154 different kinds. We are here for emotional support. We're here for financial aid. We actually do about $1.3 million in financial assistance to the patients and families in the Gateway chapter. And we're here to educate kids as well as adults and nurses in what is blood cancers. And you probably are aware, but leukemia is a leading cause of cancer death for kids under the age of 20. It actually strikes adults 10 times that number. So we are active in about 580 schools with a back-to-school program as well.
When you look at this whole scenario, education is so key. When that news gets presented to you, it's almost overwhelming, and I didn't know anything about it. The first thing I turned to was the website. It's the first thing I looked at. This came up, your website.
Yes.
What's the first response? You've dealt with this for years with many people, and you've heard so much feedback. What's that first response from somebody?
Well, I think, especially with my family, because we went through this with my father. I had a great aunt who also had leukemia, and I think at first you're just in shock. And when the doctor comes in and says this is the diagnosis, it's really hard to comprehend. And so, Leukemia Lymphoma Society is always updating our information with the most up-to-date information as far as, treatment, diagnosis information, financial assistance information. We have connector meetings with one-on-ones. And I think it's because many times it takes everyone a different amount of time to digest and process the information of that diagnosis. And so another thing that we've done, we've created a little children's book, not just for the child to understand what's going on, but many times patients and their families are on different educational levels. And this kind of simplifies what that doctor just said, so that whether it's the grandmother reading the book to the child who's the patient, or the grandmother is the patient and trying to explain to their children and grandchildren what grandma's going through, it helps everyone to better comprehend on their own level, at their own timetable of, being able to grasp what's going on within that family.
As we talked about before, we weren't going to get into any of the doctor side of how this all works, but this is a disease, as you mentioned, that strikes all ages.
Yes. From
youngsters to seniors, and since the 60s, survival rates have doubled, tripled, even quadrupled.
Yes.
As far as a child, how do you approach your message to the children differently than you do to the adults?
Well, once again, I think that is just a personal aspect of it, where some parents allow the doctor to, tell the child with them. Some parents want to tell their own child what's going on with them. But the really good news is that, the research back in the 60s, a diagnosis for a child with a leukemia lymphoma was about a 3-4% survival rate. Today it's 91%. But once again, for those 9 or 10%, it's still unacceptable, and that's why we continue to fight and look and search for a cure.
Jamie, turning to you, being a blood cancer survivor, a young woman in her prime of life, what was it like for you to hear that news? Did it just come out of the blue for you?
It did a little bit. Like Debbie said, myself and my husband, we were just in shock. I was diagnosed at 24. I was otherwise healthy and, I had some viral type symptoms that I went to my family doctor, and that's when he told me I was actually diagnosed by my family physician with the lymphoma diagnosis, and it's very surreal and very shocking, and it takes a little while for it to sink in and become real.
I know at any age it's devastating news, but being young and married, and what was your first step? I mean, what do you do when you hear something like that at that age?
I think the first thing we did was we went to our computer and went to the LLS site and tried to figure out, what is this? What did the doctor just tell me? And I remember looking at a checklist of symptoms and mentally checked every single one of those off, and it became a little bit more real the more educated we became, and actually became a little less scary the more educated we became. So.
And now, blood cancer survivor, where do you stand right now?
Well, we're just, after 5 years with Hodgkin's lymphoma, they don't really track it anymore. So 5 years is a big benchmark. So I'm just healthy and just kind of sometimes still seems surreal, like it didn't happen. So.
What would you say to other people who are diagnosed today? There'll be people today, people tomorrow, every day diagnosed with this. What would you say about the next months or the next years of their lives?
I would just say that it will pass and you'll get through it. And I think that we've touched several times on educating yourselves and really learning about the disease and knowing what's going on inside of your body and knowing what these chemotherapy drugs and radiation are doing to your body. And with myself, as I said before, the more educated I became, the more hopeful I became. And there's a tremendous cure rate with the disease and very hopeful.
And we'll talk a little bit later in the show about a special young woman who's in our control room and was on the news desk before we started. Debbie, as far as that knowledge and being there, there's a wealth of knowledge on the website.
Yes.
And there's brochures. There's really no reason not to understand fully about everything. There's so many people, including myself. I'll be the first to say, when I went through my heart attack scare a few years ago, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know anything about it. I didn't want to go to the doctor. I felt it'll go away. But the more I learned about it and why I was having these symptoms and what caused it, it made me feel more relaxed. What would you say to the people out there who say, I'm going to turn my back on this, I don't want to know?
Well, I think any cancer is a scary diagnosis. And, it's not just about yourself, it's about the whole family. The whole family is affected by any diagnosis with a cancer, in particular blood cancer that we're talking about here. But I just think that there is support, and as a patient, you need a whole support system, whether it's for yourself or for your family. And that's what I think patients need to keep in mind.
Through the years, we've always played Light the Night promos here.
Yes.
And can you explain the difference for everybody, the difference between leukemia and lymphoma?
Basically, when we're talking about a blood cancer, whether it affects red blood cells or white blood cells, leukemias and they will hang out in the bone marrow, and so we're doing a lot of research to get them out of their comfort zone, so to speak, so we can zap them. We're finding from the research, and this is really exciting, Randy, the research from FDA has approved 56 drug cancer treatments since 2000. Of those 56, 23 have been done and financed and helped through Leukemia Lymphoma Society for blood cancer patients. Those 23 cancer treatments are now being used for solid cancers like colon, breast cancer, lung, and pancreatic cancers. And the reason is because it seems that because it's a fluid, it's easier with researchers to recreate a fluid than to say, let's pretend I am a liver. And trying to work with that type of research. So we're seeing great strides in research for cures, and it's all possible through the generosity of supporters and our donors, like through Light the Night.
As far as genetically, is this a disease that is passed down from father to son? Do genetics play a part in this?
When I first started this job, I was reading up on the same thing because it was very odd that my great aunt had it, my father had it, and they're still saying no, there's no genetics to it, although it is an odd tendency. But what they're really honing in on is the DNA and the genosequencing of everyone's particular blood sequencing. So I think that we're going to find out more and more information, the more research that is coming through, which is being financed by our donors with. So for example, in Missouri and Illinois, we actually are funding $11.6 million in research to find a cure. Nationally, we're doing $262 million. So these are great investments that I feel like one day we're going to cure blood cancers and cancer.
I know with other cancers, smoking causes lung cancer. Drinking causes liver cancer. Are there any things that cause blood cancer?
And that's one of the, cryptic issues with a blood cancer is that, yes, we know that smoking can affect any kind of a cancer in your body, but we do know that benzene exposure is a huge component to a leukemia, and otherwise we don't know how to prevent it yet. And so that's, part of our research is to find out why is this happening. My father at 77 was, they said he was like a 57-year-old. The only thing he ever took was like an aspirin, and that was like every 3 weeks, he told the doctor. And it was just so odd that this man then all of a sudden is just gone in 6 months. And you sit there and you scratch your head and you say, could this have been prevented? But at this point, we don't know how.
Jamie, yourself, so many people deal with this in different ways. Some people want to open up and talk and learn and be open. Other people want to just kind of close down and be in a shell. What kind of person were you when you were diagnosed?
Initially, the first few days I did make my husband make all of the phone calls to friends and family because it's so much to take on that I didn't feel like I needed or wanted to repeat my doctor's visit 10,000 times to all of our family. But I think after the initial shock set in and it was more like, okay, let's do this. We're gonna, get rid of this disease. Then, I'm an open book. I like people to learn about it and be aware of it because it's not something that's genetic. It's not something that can be prevented. And once I was diagnosed with cancer, I started to realize how many other people are affected by it.